Big news, or maybe little news, from Nintendo this week. At long last, the company announced the much-anticipated SNES Classic Edition, a successor to the wildly popular and almost mythological NES retro system. But before you get too excited, this miniature Super Nintendo does come with fewer games and will cost $30 more than its predecessor. Retailing at $80, the SNES Classic will come with 21 pre-installed titles, including first-party titles like Donkey Kong Country, the 2D platformer that brought Donkey Kong back into the mainstream and some might even say beat his old rival Mario at his own game. Then there's Earthbound, the cult classic RPG about a telekinetic boy fighting aliens with a sequel that will never be seen in the United States. In the racing genre, there's F-Zero, a game that set the gold standard for Mode 7 racing and frustrated thousands with those bullshit corners. Representing the Kirby franchise, we have Kirby Superstar, Nintendo's answer to the Mega Man franchise but 10 times weirder. And also Kirby's Dream Course. It's really just video game golf, but with Kirby. Naturally, the system will have The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. This was kind of a given, right? Can you imagine Nintendo not putting this game on here? And of course, Star Fox. Wow. You know, some games age incredibly well and look just as good by today's standards as they did when they came out. This is not one of those games. For a second racing game, there's Super Mario Kart. Do you long for the days of Mario Kart before the blue shell? Well, here it is. And I don't even need to introduce Super Mario World. Pretty sure Nintendo didn't even have to install the game on the system. They just built it and the game appeared all on its own. And rounding out the big three trio is Super Metroid. If this was a few weeks ago, I'd have a "Hey, Nintendo remembered that Metroid exists" joke, but now that there are two games on the way, I've really got nothing. And there's Super Punch-Out, one of the more obscure Nintendo franchises. This is a game that holds up shockingly well for its age. And finally, Yoshi's Island, the weird, colorful semi-sequel to Super Mario World that gave us Baby Mario and the most horrific sound effect in video game history. But there's more than just first-party titles on the system. Filling out the lineup of games are third-party titles from Capcom, Konami, and Squaresoft, starting with Contra 3: The Alien Wars, a fast-paced action shooter designed around the days when extra lives cost quarters. Then there's Final Fantasy III, which has now been correctly named Final Fantasy VI for so long that I'll bet it'll confuse some of the youngins out there. As might Mega Man X, which is not Mega Man 10, but a spin-off of the Mega Man franchise that, let's face it, surpasses the original in pretty much all aspects. Secret of Mana is another obscure classic in the lineup. It's halfway between Final Fantasy and Zelda. Street Fighter II Turbo Hyper Fighting is in there as well, which is odd since they just put an updated version of the game on the Switch. You'd think they'd avoid competing with themselves like that. On the dark side of things, Super Castlevania 4 is as frustratingly hard as you remember it being, which is still more forgiving than Super Ghouls and Ghosts. Criminy, were we gluttons for punishment back in those days. And of course, there's the half-third-party title, Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, a game so good that you're lucky this video even exists because I could very easily have just kept on playing. Last but not least, the system will include the never-before-released Star Fox 2. Though fully completed, the game was cancelled shortly before its release as Nintendo redirected their focus to the N64. Prototype ROMs have been found in the wild over the years, but this will be the first time the game has seen an official release. And that is the lineup for the SNES Classic Edition. Did I really need to go over each one? No. Did it pad an otherwise light news week and give me an excuse to spend the afternoon playing old video games? Yes, it did. As for the system itself, it'll come with an HDMI cable, a USB charging cable, and 2 controllers for all your couch co-op needs. Nintendo has set a September 29th release date for the SNES Classic, so we'll have to see if they produce more than 10 of them this time around. And if that's not enough retro gaming for you, StarCraft Remastered has a release date as well. The update to the classic RTS will feature remastered graphics and audio along with modern matchmaking tools, but will otherwise be identical to the original game because anything else would cause the entire country of South Korea to riot. The remaster is available for pre-purchase for $15 and the unremastered game is free to play right now. Moving things on to movies, in theaters this week we have Spider-Man Homecoming. The start of a brand new era in Spider-Man films, the latest incarnation of the web-slinger will take on the Vulture in his first solo outing. Well, as solo as it can get when half the cast of Iron Man keeps dropping in. And over on Netflix, this one came out quicker than I thought it would. The first season of Castlevania will be released on July 7th for your binging pleasure. And for video games coming out this week, it's still pretty slim pickings, no doubt due to the continuing Steam summer sale, but there are some interesting entries, like To the Light, a puzzle art platform game that incorporates not safe for work art in a Zelda-ish dungeon crawler, because why not? And speaking of retro RPGs, there's always an RPG Maker entry to look at. The First Time I Died may or may not have any gameplay outside of walking around and talking to people, but on the bright side, it only lasts for 3 hours. And finally for this week in pixel art, something that actually looks pretty good, I think. Baobab's Mausoleum Episode 1, Avifagos Don't Eat Flamingos, is definitely a game of some kind. It may even be many kinds of game. It's hard to tell, but it sure looks interesting. Heading into the 3D realm, Bomb Defense is a twist on the tower defense genre that's more puzzle-oriented, forcing you to set up various traps in order to protect an adorable kitten. And finally, Ben the Exorcist is a first-person horror comedy game that puts you in control of a priest trying to banish the ghostly inhabitants of a haunted house. It could be worth a closer look. Wrapping things up with this week's CGBros video, we have Fallen by Sasha Gittert, telling the short and bittersweet tale of a shooting star, just in case you wanted to have an existential crisis over a cartoon rock. And finally, this week's awesome video is The Philosophy of Spider-Man by Wisecrack, which is really more about the philosophy of America, so it's good for both the upcoming Spider-Man movie and the 4th of July. Good synergy, Wisecrack.
Parker mirrors America, a young country that post-World War II happened upon a massive amount of power, and constantly grapples with how to responsibly wield this newfound power, if it should at all.
That's everything for this week, so what's your take on the SNES Classic? Or what's your favorite SNES game in general? Let me know in the comments. Like this video if you love freedom, subscribe if you love America, and have a great Independence Day. Or, on the off chance that a non-American is watching this, have a great week and shoot off some fireworks anyway.